You're standing at the gas pump. You've got the nozzle in one hand, and you're just watching those little digital numbers spin. And they are spinning fast, faster than they were last month, faster than you budgeted for. You watch it cross $60, then 70, then 80, and your stomach just kind of does this slow, miserable drop. You haven't even filled the tank all the way, and you're already mentally recalculating what you have to cut from your grocery list this week to make up for it. Or maybe for you, that wasn't the gas station. Maybe you were standing in the middle of aisle 4 at the supermarket, holding a bottle of cooking oil or a pack of chicken breasts, staring at the price tag and thinking, wait, didn't I just buy this exact same thing a few weeks ago for $3 less? Am I losing my mind? You aren't losing your mind. And it's not just you being bad at budgeting. It's not that you're suddenly spending recklessly or that you've lost control of your finances. I'm Karen. I spend way too much time trying to make sense of money and people, and honestly, right now, none of the math is mathing. I look at the economy, I look at human behavior, and I try to figure out why we all feel so utterly exhausted by simply trying to survive. And lately, that exhaustion has a very specific source. Right now, in 2026, the entire global economy is essentially holding its breath, and your wallet is the thing getting squeezed. We turn on the news and we see headlines about the Middle East. We hear about military strikes involving the US, Israel, and Iran. We hear generals and politicians using massive abstract words like geopolitical instability, strategic reserves, and maritime choke points. But the news rarely connects those massive abstract words to the fact that your electric bill just went up by $30 or that your favorite brand of coffee is suddenly a luxury item. There is a massive disconnect between the geopolitical chess game being played by billionaires and world leaders and the brutal reality of the middle class trying to finance a Tuesday. I call this the geopolitical tax. It is a silent, invisible tax levied on every single thing you buy, driven by conflicts happening thousands of miles away from your front door. And today, we need to talk about it, because once you actually understand how a drone strike on the other side of the planet translates into your grocery bill going up 48 hours later, you stop feeling crazy. You stop blaming yourself for feeling broke. And more importantly, you can actually start protecting your money, because the system isn't going to protect it for you. So let's break down exactly what is happening, why your life just got so unbelievably expensive again, and how we are going to survive the trap. The first thing we have to dismantle is this comforting lie we all tell ourselves, that our money is local. You know how it goes. You live in Ohio or Texas or maybe a suburb of London or Sydney. You go to a local farmer's market or a regional grocery chain, and you buy an apple that was grown in your own state. You buy milk from a dairy farm 3 towns over, and you think, well, I'm buying local. Whatever is happening in the Middle East shouldn't really affect the price of this apple, right? Wrong. That is the illusion. Basically, we like to think of our economy as series of disconnected ponds, but it's not. It's one giant, incredibly sensitive ocean, and right now, someone just dropped a massive boulder into it, and the tsunami is hitting your local grocery store. Why did that local apple get more expensive? Let's trace it back. The farmer who grew that apple drives a massive tractor. That tractor runs on diesel. The fertilizer used to keep the soil rich, it's made using natural gas and petrochemicals. The plastic bag you put the apples in, made from oil. The truck that drove the apples from the farm to the store, diesel. The electricity powering the refrigerated display case at the supermarket, partially generated by natural gas. Every single step of human survival in the modern world is dripping in oil and gas. Oil is not just the fuel that goes into your Honda Civic. It is the foundational ingredient of modern civilization. It's the calories of the global economy. When the price of a barrel of Brent crude oil spikes past $110, $115, or even $120, like it is right now because of the conflict with Iran, it doesn't just make your commute more expensive, it acts as a base-level tax on every single physical object you touch. You are paying a geopolitical tax on your local grown apple because the energy required to grow it, package it, and move it just skyrocketed. It's infuriating, right? You're essentially subsidizing a war you have absolutely nothing to do with every time you buy a snack. To understand why the price of that barrel of oil is spiking so violently, we have to look at a very specific place on the map. You've probably heard the name 100 times on the news lately, the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I am not a military strategist, I'm just someone who looks at the money, but you cannot understand your budget right now without understanding this one tiny strip of water. Imagine the global economy is a human body. It has veins and arteries carrying blood all over the place to keep things functioning. The Strait of Hormuz is the main artery. It's a narrow waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. At its narrowest point, it is only 21 miles wide. That is nothing. You could drive across a bridge that length in 20 minutes. But here is the terrifying math. Roughly 20% of the entire world's daily petroleum consumption passes through that tiny 21-mile gap. That's around 20 million barrels of oil every single day. Furthermore, about 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, LNG, which is what heats homes and powers factories across Europe and Asia, also has to squeeze through that strait. It is the single most critical financial choke point on planet Earth. And right now, because of the escalating war involving Iran, Israel, and the U.S., that strait is effectively a no-go zone. Commercial shipping companies look at the rockets and the military blockades and say, yeah, no thanks, we aren't risking a $100 million oil tanker. So what happens? The artery gets blocked. The global economy has a heart attack. When 20% of the world's oil is suddenly trapped and can't get to the countries that desperately need it to keep their lights on and their factories running, panic sets in. The countries that do have oil suddenly realize their product is incredibly valuable. Demand stays exactly the same. We still need to drive to work, we still need to eat, but the supply just plummeted. So the price of crude oil shoots the moon. And within days, literally days, that panic trickles down from global commodities markets in London and New York straight to the digital sign at the gas station on your corner. When you hear Strait of Hormuz on the evening news, I want you to mentally translate that to my life is about to get 15% more expensive, because that is the real world translation. Now let's get into the ripple effect, because it doesn't stop at the gas pump. The real silent wealth killer of the middle class right now is what I call the diesel tax. Think about how you get the things you buy. We live in the era of peak convenience. You open an app, you tap your thumb, and a package arrives on your porch 48 hours later. It feels like magic, but it's not magic. It's logistics, and logistics run on diesel. Diesel is the fuel of the working economy. It powers the massive cargo ships crossing the ocean, the freight trains cutting across the country, and the 18-wheeler trucks on the highway. Because the Middle East is essentially a conflict zone right now, those massive cargo ships I mentioned, they can't just sail through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal like they usually do. It's too dangerous. So they have to reroute. They are taking the long way around the entire continent of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. Do you know what it means to sail a massive container ship around the entire continent of Africa? It adds weeks to the journey, but more importantly, it burns millions of gallons of extra fuel. And who do you think pays for that extra fuel? Do you think the massive multi-billion-dollar shipping conglomerates are just going to absorb that cost out of the goodness of their hearts? Of course not. They slap what's called a fuel surcharge on the company shipping the goods. So, let's say a company is importing running shoes. The shipping company says, hey, it costs us 30% more in diesel to get your shoes across the ocean now. The shoe company says, okay, we'll just raise the retail price of the shoes by 30%. And then you walk into the store or you log onto the website and you pay $130 for a pair of sneakers that cost $100 last year. This is the diesel tax. You are literally paying for the extra gas a cargo ship burned off the coast of South Africa. And it applies to everything. It applies to clothes, electronics, car parts, and yes, groceries. Patrick Penfield, a supply chain professor, pointed out recently that fuel prices account for 50 to 60% of the total operating cost of shipping goods. When fuel goes up, everything goes up. So, if you're sitting there wondering why you feel poorer even though your salary hasn't changed, this is why. The cost of moving reality from point A to point B has exploded, and the bill is being handed directly to you. Okay, so we've covered fuel and shipping, but there is a much sneakier, much more dangerous layer to this geopolitical tax, and it's going to hit the grocery store hard in the coming months. It's about the things oil and gas actually make. We tend to think of fossil fuels only as things we burn, but they are also raw ingredients. Specifically, natural gas is the primary ingredient used to make nitrogen fertilizer. Think about that for a second. The food that feeds the world requires fertilizer. Without it, crop yields plummet, and we don't have enough corn, wheat, or soy to feed the population, let alone the livestock we rely on for meat. When the war shut down shipping lanes and threw the energy markets into chaos, the price of natural gas in places like Europe spiked by over 75%. Almost instantly, the cost to manufacture fertilizer doubled or tripled. This is a slow-moving disaster for your grocery budget. A farmer planning for the upcoming planting season looks at the price of fertilizer and says, I can't afford this. So they either plant fewer crops, which means less food in the supply chain, driving prices up, or they buy the expensive fertilizer and pass that massive cost on to the distributors, who pass it on to the grocery stores, who pass it on to, you guessed it, you. And it's not just the food itself, it's the packaging. Petrochemicals derived from oil and gas are what we use to make plastic. Every single plastic bottle of juice, every plastic wrapper around your cheese, every styrofoam tray holding your ground beef, the raw material cost for all of that just went up. This is why I always tell people that inflation is a hydra. You cut off one head and 3 more grow back. The government might tell you, hey, look, core inflation is only at 2.5%, but they strip out food and energy from those core numbers because they are too volatile. I don't know about you, but food and energy are the 2 things I literally cannot opt out of buying. I can't tell my kids, sorry guys, the geopolitical situation in the Persian Gulf is really volatile right now, so we are fasting for the rest of the week. You have to eat, and because you have to eat, you are forced to pay the geopolitical tax baked into the fertilizer and the plastic wrap. It is a captive market, and that is why it feels so incredibly suffocating. Now we have to talk about human nature, because while the supply chain issues are very real, there is a darker psychological game being played against you right now by major corporations. I call it war washing or greedflation 2.0. Here's how it works. A massive multinational food corporation watches the news just like you do. They see that consumers expect prices to go up because of the war. They know that you, the consumer, are bracing for impact. So what do? Let's say their actual costs due to the diesel tax and the fertilizer spike went up by 8%. Do they raise their prices by 8%? No. They raise their prices by 15%. They use the headline of the war as a smokescreen to pad their profit margins. If you complain or if regulators start asking questions, they just point to the Middle East and say, look at the price of oil. Our hands are tied. The supply chain is a mess. Meanwhile, if you actually look at their quarterly earnings reports, which are public, by the way, they are reporting record-breaking, historic profits. They are buying back their own stock to enrich their shareholders while you are sitting at the kitchen table trying to figure out if you can afford name-brand cereal this week. They are weaponizing your economic anxiety against you. They know you're distracted by the chaos of the world, and they are using that distraction to pick your pocket. You'll also see it in shrinkflation. That's when the price stays the same, but the product gets smaller. Suddenly, your 16-ounce bag of coffee is 12 ounces. Your family-sized bag of chips feels mostly full of air. They are essentially stealing a portion of your grocery budget, banking on the fact that you're too stressed about gas prices to notice that your soap bar is 20% thinner. This is why I always tell people that you have to be absolutely ruthless right now. Brand loyalty is a tax on the financially unaware. When a crisis hits, corporations are not your friends. They are not in this together with you. They are optimizing for revenue. You must optimize for your own survival. Before we talk about exactly how to survive this, there is one more piece of the macroeconomic puzzle we have to lock into place. And this one is going to sting if you have credit card debt or were hoping to buy a house anytime soon. For the last year, everyone has been waiting for the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. We've been holding our breath thinking, okay, if they just drop rates, my credit card minimum payments will go down, mortgage rates will drop, and the pressure will finally ease up. The war just blew that hope to pieces. Here is the brutal, simple logic of central banking. The Federal Reserve's #1 job is to fight inflation. They do that by keeping interest rates high, which makes borrowing money expensive, which slows down the economy and stops prices from rising too fast. But as we just discussed, the war in Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz are causing a massive, unavoidable spike in the price of everything. Oil, gas, food, shipping, it's all shooting up. That means inflation is ticking right back up. If inflation is rising because of a geopolitical oil shock, the Federal Reserve cannot lower interest rates. In fact, if things get bad enough, they might even have to raise them again to try and crush consumer demand. So what does that mean for you? It means the cavalry is not coming. If you have $10,000 sitting on a credit card at 24% interest, you cannot wait for the macroeconomic environment to improve so your payments get cheaper. That high interest rate is going to stay high for a long, long time. The higher for longer era just got an indefinite extension. You are being squeezed on both ends. The geopolitical tax is making your daily life more expensive, leaving you with less cash at the end of the month. And the high interest rates are making your debt more punishing, draining whatever cash you do have left. It is a perfect storm designed to keep the middle class exactly where they are, exhausted, stressed, and working solely to service their debt and pay for their basic needs. It is a trap. Okay, take a deep breath. I know this is heavy. Honestly, sometimes I look at all this data and I just want to go live in the woods and barter with pine cones, but we live in the real world and we have to navigate it. You cannot control the Strait of Hormuz. You cannot control the Federal Reserve. You cannot control what multinational shipping conglomerates charge for diesel surcharges. But you can control what happens inside the four walls of your house. You can control where your money goes. Here's how you survive the geopolitical tax. First, the commuter's diet. Right now, your car is a liability. Every time you turn the key, you are burning money at a premium rate. You need to instantly audit your driving habits. Can you negotiate 1 or 2 work-from-home days a week with your boss? Frame it as a temporary measure during the crisis. If you can't, can you carpool? Can you consolidate your errands so you are only making 1 trip a week instead of 4? I know it sounds basic, but when gas is nearing $5 or $6 a gallon, depending on where you live, cutting your driving by 20% is the equivalent of giving yourself a cash raise. Stop driving out of habit. Drive with purpose. Second, anticipate the logistics lag. Remember what we talked about with the shipping delays and the fertilizer costs? Those price hikes take a few months to fully hit the retail shelves. The produce you buy today was planted months ago, but the harvest coming next season is going to be wildly expensive. You need to inflation-proof your pantry right now. I'm not talking about becoming a doomsday prepper and buying a bunker. I'm talking about rational, pragmatic stocking up. Buy non-perishable staples, rice, beans, pasta, canned goods, cooking oils, before the new higher shipping and production costs are fully baked into the retail price. If you have freezer space, buy meat in bulk directly from a local butcher if you can, bypassing the massive corporate supply chains entirely. Lock in today's prices before tomorrow's reality hits. Third, ruthless debt triage. Because interest rates aren't coming down, your variable interest debt is a financial emergency. If you're carrying a balance on a credit card, you need to attack it like your hair is on fire. Pause your investments if you have to, temporarily. Stop eating out. Take every spare dollar and throw it at that 24% interest rate. You cannot afford to finance your lifestyle on credit when the baseline cost of living is surging. You will get trapped in a minimum payment cycle that you will literally never escape. Fourth, the generic swap experiment. Remember greedflation? The best way to fight back is to stop buying the brands that are exploiting you. For the next 30 days, force yourself to buy the store brand generic version of absolutely everything: cereal, trash bags, soap, over-the-counter medicine. You will quickly realize that 90% of the time, it is the exact same product made in the exact same factory, just without the multi-million-dollar marketing budget attached to it. Strip the corporate logos out of your pantry. You are paying a premium for a feeling, and right now, you cannot afford feelings. You can only afford math. Fifth, acknowledge the war tax in your budget. You need to sit down this weekend, open your budget or your bank app, and physically rewrite the numbers. Look at your mandatory expenses: groceries, gas, utilities. Assume they are all going up by 10 to 15% across the board. Calculate what that actual dollar amount is. Let's say it's an extra $300 a month. You now have to go into your discretionary spending, the fun stuff, the subscriptions, the restaurants, the clothes, and ruthlessly cut $300. Do not rely on willpower. Do not say, "I'll just try to spend less." Hope is not a financial strategy. You must pre-allocate the cuts before the geopolitical tax drains your account. I think about money a lot, as you know, but more than the numbers, I think about the psychological toll it takes on us. It is profoundly exhausting to do everything right, to go to work, to try and stick to a budget, to try and raise a family, and still feel like you are constantly falling behind because of events happening oceans away that you have absolutely no say in. It's okay to feel angry about it. It's okay to stand at that gas pump and feel a deep, burning frustration that your hard-earned money is being vaporized by a geopolitical conflict. Your feelings are entirely valid. The system is incredibly fragile, and when it breaks, the middle class acts as the shock absorber. But anger won't pay the electric bill. Frustration won't lower your credit card balance. The people who survive economic shocks like this, and yes, we are in the middle of a massive shock right now, are the ones who refuse to be passive participants. They are the ones who look at the board, recognize that the rules of the game just changed, and immediately adjust their strategy. You cannot fix the world. You cannot fix the supply chain, but you can fortify your own life. You can become hyper-aware of where every single dollar is going. You can refuse to let corporations exploit your anxiety. You can protect your peace of mind by getting aggressive with your debt and defensive with your spending. Take 1 hour this weekend, just 1 hour. Sit down with your numbers, look at the reality of the math without flinching, and build your escape plan. Because the geopolitical tax is here, and nobody is going to pay it for you. But if you're smart and if you're ruthless, you can make sure it doesn't break you. You've got this. I'll see you in the next one.